In my own case, though, I agree. I was never a real Christian because I'm not a perpetual 5-year-old. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Noah's Snark. I'm your host, Atheist Josephina, aka AJV. I don't know if I ever really deconstructed from Christianity, as I'll explain. Technically speaking, just like everyone else, I was born an atheist, and I identify as an atheist now, specifically a philosophical, scientific, agnostic atheist. What is an atheist? I have to answer this because apologists always get this wrong, perhaps intentionally, in order to strawman atheistic arguments. An atheist is someone who is not convinced of the actual existence of any God. That's it. Being an atheist doesn't inform any other kind of ideology out of necessity, in the same way being a Christian doesn't inform any other kind of ideology out of necessity. For example, not all Christians agree on the exact meaning of the crucifixion or believe in a triune God, and may have different rituals they practice that are not found in the Bible. Christians also don't all subscribe to the same political beliefs based on their Christianity. An atheist does not believe in the existence of a God, and that's all there is to it. It just happens to be the case in the United States, at least, that atheists tend to be socially liberal, generally score higher on intelligence tests, and often know the Bible better than the average Christian. But whatever. Now, maybe with the exception of 2.5 years of my life, I guess I've always been an atheist, even if I didn't explicitly think it or say it. There was also a period of time I would have said I'm agnostic, but as George H. Smith pointed out in his book, Atheism, The Case Against God, agnosticism is not the escape from belief or disbelief that everyone thinks it is, as agnostics can either be theistic or atheistic. On a related note, apologists, during a conversation with a non-believer, often try to move the atheist towards agnosticism, seemingly unaware that they too are agnostic about God's existence since we can't know everything with 100% certainty. I get that they think they know with 100% certainty, but that's just a feeling they have, and feelings are not certainty. I feel, based on my knowledge of mythology, philosophy, and psychology, and my reasoning and analytic abilities, that there are no gods. But I can't say with 100% certainty that no gods exist because that would be intellectually dishonest since there's the possibility I've missed something. An admission you'll never hear an apologist make, by the way. I'll address those 2.5 years I wasn't an atheist first. I was half-heartedly convinced that God existed by what I thought at the time was an answered prayer, the details of which aren't important. As so many believers have done and still do, I was convinced by the hits, so to speak, while ignoring the misses. It was basic confirmation bias, or more specifically something like the selective reporting bias, which specifically excludes negative results. Fortune tellers famously rely on this bias. Now I know what your next question is, why is an atheist praying? At the time this prayer was answered, I wasn't quite committed to my atheist identity, having been raised Roman Catholic. Although I can't say I ever really believed God existed, up to and during that time my prayer was answered, if asked about it, I would have told the person asking about my religion that I was Roman Catholic because that's simply what most everyone around me was, and that's what was expected of me. Aha, strikes the apologist, you were never a real Christian, a charge they level against anyone who leaves the faith. In my own case, though, I agree. I was never a real Christian because I'm not a perpetual 5-year-old. Growing up, I can't recall the number of times as a child I sat in church not believing these ridiculous tales actually happened, and that I'd much rather be at home reading encyclopedias or science books, or playing with my chemistry set and advancing my knowledge and understanding, which is probably what a person should do if they want to become a functioning adult. As a child, I think going to church, which thankfully wasn't evangelical and my parents weren't pushy about it, I think going to church really primed my bullshit detector. I've never believed in magic. Oh, I know, magic and miracles aren't the same thing. Shut up, yes they are. You just make up definitions in order to make a distinction. Even as a kid, I never believed in magic, and I found it insane that anyone did. But life goes on. Eventually, in my mid-20s, 3 things happened in somewhat quick succession. 1, I started reading a lot of Eastern religion and really enjoyed the principles of Taoism, which I find to be a very live and let live kind of philosophy and not rigidly religious. Taoism can even be atheistic or theistic, which I think is pretty neat. 2, I read the Bible cover to cover while trying not to have any preconceived notions about what I was reading. While the Bible is entertaining, I didn't see it as entertaining because of its beautiful univocal message. It was entertaining because, as an amateur writer at the time, I thought the Bible, with its ridiculous and often monstrous stories that fell apart if you even asked the simplest questions, was so poorly written and edited, it blew me away. Then there was number 3. I was in Barnes & Noble in the philosophy section, and I stumbled upon the book I mentioned earlier, Atheism, the Case Against God. I burned through that book on the spot. Here was everything I ever thought about the existence of God, but hadn't been able to put into words. I followed that up with Carl Sagan's Demon-Haunted World, and man, did I feel stupid for ever telling people I was ever religious in any sense of the word. So the point came where I said to myself, I suppose I'm an atheist. I wasn't shocked because on a certain level, I felt I always had been. So the moment I concluded that gods probably didn't exist wasn't in itself a gruesome realization. For example, it didn't leave me feeling empty inside, but it was a gruesome realization insofar as it forced me to think about something worse than the idea that God doesn't exist. What could be worse? What's worse are the mental gymnastics, or lack thereof, required to explain God's divine hiddenness or some other aspect of God's existence. Defending the existence of God at all costs, it's intellectual dishonesty of the highest order. That any given person will insist they know the mind of God while not seeing or plainly ignoring how God's desires align perfectly with their own desires is a testament to the power of the brain's emotional center, the amygdala, to direct consciousness beyond the prefrontal cortex's ability to reason effectively. And when an emotional mind engages in faulty reasoning often enough, it predisposes that brain to keep making mistakes. It's no coincidence that most conspiracy theorists, flat earthers for instance, are also religious. Not always, but I think often enough, religion inoculates the mind against reason. I could say Trump supporters who behave in a cult-like manner also demonstrate this point, but I would be making an assertion that requires evidence to be taken seriously. And that's where truly reasonable people and deeply religious people often differ. The latter doesn't rely on evidence and expects to be taken seriously anyway. I believe this is incredibly dangerous considering the number of times in all sorts of manners we've seen religious people abuse power. This is not to say a majority of religious people abuse power, certainly not. And I don't think religion is much of a factor in whether a person is a good person or not. But religion is definitely easily weaponized by people seeking to abuse its power. As the saying goes, need money, start a religion. If you're charismatic enough, you'll be rich in no time. Is it possible I'll ever come to believe in, say, the God of Christianity? I think it's highly unlikely given what we know about how the Bible was written and constructed, and the improbability of the occurrence of miracles versus the probability of alternate explanations. We also face the obstacle of a definition of God, or any God that everyone agrees upon. But even if I did come to believe in that existence, I think I'd have a hard time accepting and worshiping this God as a just and loving being, at least based on what's said in the Bible. I can't say I'd never believe it since I don't know the future, but I would place the chances at about the same chances of me converting to any other religion. So, I'm an atheist, which under the surface I think I've always been, and I'm an atheist, which tells you virtually nothing else about me by itself, except that maybe I'm the most annoying person at Thanksgiving dinner. And I like that about myself. Thanks for listening to Noah's Snark. I'm AJV. Until next time, revel in reason and love the logical.